With your permission, I'd like to try to give a certain perspective approach to davening, and detail a little more detail than what we've been doing in the past. We'll start with the general structure, which you've seen before. We've talked about that the Kabbalists speak about the progression of the morning service through the four worlds of the Kabbalah. Whatever a world is, we're not going to talk about that now, but there seems to be, you could say, four modes of reality or different types of relationships or closeness to God. And the four worlds are usually known as A, B, A. It's an acronym standing for Atzilut. Atzilut has the word Etzel in it, which means, it's usually translated as the world of nearness, because you're near. Etzer means near. So it's the world of nearness. Closest to God, we're actually with God. Perhaps in his innermost chamber, in the audience with God. Then there's that's the Aleph. Then there's the Bet, stands for Beriah, otherwise known as creation. So the world of creation, somehow things get created there. Maybe we're separate from God, we're created by God, and it's a level of, closeness to God, but perhaps a little more distant than actually being right there with Him. Then the next world, Yud, stands for Yetzirah. Okay. Yetzirah. At this stage, these are really just names. We didn't really explain what they mean, but there's the four worlds I'm describing to you. Yetzirah, which is usually translated as formation. Perhaps what gets created in kind of an embryonic state in the first stage of coming out from things that get developed or created from God, get a little bit more of differentiation and some form, taking on form in the third level. And the lowest level, Ayin, stands for, Asiyah. Asiyah is the Hebrew word that starts with an ayin, and translate Asiyah. It's usually translated as the word of action, right? So,
Asiyah is action.
Action, yeah.
In Hebrew,
like Aniya said.
In Hebrew, yeah, the asot, right? The asot, to do. So the world of action is the lowest of the four worlds. That's the world that we live in mostly, with material things and people and their behaviors and actions and everything we do in the world. Of course, our souls are connecting to God at all time. Our goal is, our goal is to try to connect to God within our actions, to bring Him into our world and be connected to godliness at all times. But you can imagine that may be hard if you're just, when you're eating and you're drinking and you're doing your taxes and you're figuring out how to get the bus to this place or that place. You're not naturally thinking about God. That's sometimes you only can think about God when you sort of leave your daily mundane activities and you perhaps enter a different consciousness. You strive for being a little bit removed from your mundane activities. Perhaps you get to the basics, back to the basics, right? The formation, the way the world is formed, and the basic understanding of who you are, where you are, what you are. And perhaps there's even on a higher level, maybe you're doing some kind of a meditation on your relationship to God and recognizing that you are a creature of God, created by God. And then the highest levels, maybe when you reach an understanding or some kind of a mode of consciousness where you're actually with God. You're enveloped within God. We mentioned this in previous classes, that this is some kind of a principle that's described in the other religions as unio mystica, some kind of unity with God. Nearness is the closest thing you can have to actual unity, so you're actually part of God. And these are the four classic worlds, the four worlds that Kabbalah speaks of. There's a fifth one, we won't get into it right now. And the system that I've described, sorry?
Just for logic's sake.
Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon is the primordial man, perhaps. And there's other, or the world of Keter, the world of the crown. But now the prayer service is divided this way. I mentioned this before, but it's good to review. With these four stages. You get up in the morning. First thing you do is you say the morning blessings. They're very, very physical. They're very related to, I'm opening up my eyes. I can stand up. I can, God gave me ground to step on. All the morning blessings, the 15 morning blessings, they're all very, very physical and praising God from that place. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, does the rabbi believe that, you should say these blessings, along with actions, sort of like how Rambam talks about it?
It's a good question. I usually say that it's not advised to do the way the Rambam writes, to say the blessings as you're putting on your clothes, for example, or as you're putting on your shoes. Each stage, the common practice, and I think it's a good practice, is that we delay saying all the blessings until we start our prayers. So you do all those actions, and then a few minutes later, whatever it is, when you're either in shul, that's usually what I advise, when you're in shul, when you're properly dressed, and you're properly washed your hands, and you're in a place where you can concentrate, then you recite all the blessings with the most concentration at that point. That's the common custom. Despite the attraction to actually blessing when you put on your shoes, or blessing when you stand up. There's something very attractive to that, but practically I think it's usually doesn't work out so well. Back to our description of the morning service, morning blessings, and also I would include with the morning blessings the korbanot, the offerings. I speak about the rams and the bulls and the spices, all very sensual material goods that we use in our worship of God. Of course, we don't use them practically nowadays, but they describe the temple service, which was very this worldly, and perhaps that's also reaching to God from the level of the world of action. The next level, Psukei de Zimra, verses of song. This is associated with the second level, the world of Yetzirah. The third stage being the Shema, the Shema and its blessings, right after the Baruch Hu. The third stage is parallel to the world of creation, and ultimately the highlight, the pinnacle of our progression, climbing up the hill away from our mundane existence, similar to all the animals. Even though we're trying to connect to God from all the stages, pinnacle is when we are, at least our minds are somehow in the world of Atzilut, in the level of nearness to God. We've described how when in prayer, we're supposed to imagine that we are speaking to God. And so closest, or speaking to God, or even enveloped within God, is a higher level of intention for the actual Amidah service. Right? So if we have, I'll just write it down on the board so it's clear. So this is the morning blessings and the offerings. Then this is the Psukei de Zimra, verses of praise, part of the morning service. Then the third level is the right Shema and its blessings. And the fourth, the highest level, is the Amidah. Okay, the Arizal describes this formation with many other Kabbalists. How's that sound so far? Now I'll take some questions. Somebody, Reuven, you wanted to say something? You were just. Oh, I love when that happens. What does that mean practically, though? I also would like to add one more element to it. There's, we talked about it before, but that I've tried to refine it a little bit more, and I've come to realize there are four basic feelings when it comes to worshiping God. The first one, associated with obviously the lowest level, the most basic level, is recognizing your status as being a subject of God or a dependent. How do you spell that? Did I do it right? Is that right? Dependent? Yes?
Yes.
Or, so you are also, when we speak about God save me, God help me, God, you realize that you are dependent on God and you need His help in many different ways. Then the second mode, which we've described before, is where you have. One second, I'm trying to remember. Sorry. Okay. Noach li. Everybody comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay.
You need a towel for the sauna?
Baruch Hashem. Baruch
Thank you very much.
Hashem. Baruch Hashem. One second, I'm trying to remember the actual word that I was using. I have it here written down. Excuse me one moment. Yes. Yes. This is connecting to God through love, through awe. It's usually associated with the world of emotions as well. This level, so you're feeling connected to Him. The third level is feelings of dedication. We spoke about, how you're almost like, the master-slave relationship. So you're a dedicated servant of God. Your dedication, and then here ultimately we spoke about before being united or united is the best way we can say it for now. So you're united and feeling together, closeness to God. So these are the four basic modes of approaching God, of worshiping God. Feeling you're a dependent, pretty basic one. And then when you're, many times we say dveikut, right? Being clinging to God. It's one of the mitzvot of the Torah to cling to God, and love and fear, and this is perhaps your forward passion to connect to God, and then the dedication is perhaps the extent to which you commit we speak about mesirut nefesh, of being giving your all towards God, of dedicating your heart with all your heart. Worship, right? You should love God with all your heart, with all your soul and with all your might, and then ultimately being one with God, and recognizing that you are in some ways part of God. So what I'd like to do with you, please open up your Sidurim, and I'd like to try to read the Amidah together with you, page 174. If anybody needs one, here's one right here. There's a few on the table here. Everybody have a Sidur open to page 174 for the Amidah. And let's try and together read the Amidah from a different perspective than we're usually used to. And not surprisingly, the perspective I'd like to try to think of and to read the Amidah prayer, the perspective is perspective number 4 of I'm not approaching God anymore. I'm there. I'm with God. I'm united with God. I'm almost part of God. So what happens when you're reciting the prayer from that stance? What you're experiencing then is not just that you are approaching God, that you are begging of God, that you're asking from God, that you're speaking to God, but actually, when you're reciting the words, you are feeling the feelings that are there from being associated with, from being united with or associated with God and being together with Him. So when you read let's start at the beginning. It's called the section called Avot, or the Patriarchs, page 174. So, blessed are you, Lord our God, God of our fathers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The great, the mighty, awesome God, God Most High. We have a list of attributes that we're describing. So imagine you are feeling that because you're there in the presence of the great God, the God who is mighty and awesome, who bestows acts of loving kindness. You're feeling His acts of loving kindness in yourself. He creates all. Well, you're feeling like God is creating you, is part of all. You're almost on the same. It's like the difference of being on the sidelines of the game or being on the playing field. You're now in the arena. It's like in the Knesset they have a gallery where you can come and watch the parliament and how it works, and all the different speakers come up. So you can sit there behind the glass. They have a glass thing now for Corona. They have it all divided up, but you can be a guest watching what's going on there in the main arena, or you can actually be on the floor of the parliament, and maybe you're the speaker at the podium, and you are making the laws. You are making things happen. So and then we say that God remembers the loving kindness of the fathers, will bring a redeemer to their children, their children's children. Who's that? Me and you. We are experiencing for the sake of His name in love. Imagine that. Feeling God's love. That's what you're supposed to be doing in the Amidah prayer. You're standing in front of God and experiencing that God gives the love and you are receiving the love. And let's continue. You are a king, a helper, a savior, and a shield. Blessed are you, Lord, shield of Avraham. You feel protected. When you're close, you could put on some kind of a suit where you could do anything you wanted to. And perhaps that's the feeling that we're describing now, is that when you are in the Amidah, you're feeling God's protection. Shield of Abraham. You're one of the children of Abraham. Let's move on forward. The next section. It's called Gvurot, or divine might. Now, and then we talk about how great you are. You give life to the dead. You have great power to the save. I'm continuing on to the next page, page 176. He sustains, right after the first ones are in the second person, this is in the third person. He sustains the living with loving kindness, and with great compassion revives the dead. He supports the fallen, heals the sick, sets captives free. One minute, don't be the observer on the outside. You're there, you're maybe feeling God doing that for you. It's not just flattery of, saying some objective, beautiful statements about how God acts in the world to others. You're feeling His might. You're feeling supported, right? He supports the fallen. So I feel supported. Can you imagine being in a place where you get healed? That there's this healing energy in the air. And he is, what else does he do here? He mechayem etim. He revives the dead. So he gives you life. You're energized. It's like nowadays to plug in your phone, right? You have to physically plug it in. But I think the iPhone already has it recharges wireless recharging, right? Just by being in proximity, nearness. The fact that you are now in the presence of the King, you are receiving life. Even if you don't actually plug in. I mean, we do try to plug in with the wrapping of the tefillin, maybe, because sort of like the cord always gets. I wonder, is it USB-C or is it the old type of plug-in where you always, they say that the old plugs had three sides. The first side doesn't work, and then the second side you realize really doesn't work. Oh, so it was the first side, the first way you needed to plug it in was the right one, and then now we have the USB-C where they're both sides works either way. So, any case, but you're receiving a recharge. God is giving you, what does it say here? He sustains the loving kindness, the living with loving kindness. You're receiving God's kindness, God loving. What better treatment do you have going to the doctor? Maybe he'll give you this kind of pill or that kind of pill, or maybe usually they don't help you at all, right? But you're going before the healer of all. You're getting healed. And He's faithful to do good for you, for your future generations, right? He says He revives the dead in the future as well. So imagine, again, we're praying from the inside, right? You're there with God, and so you're in the nuclear reactor. The nuclear reactor is dangerous, right? Because our bodies can't survive radioactivity. But this is not dangerous to us. This is the opposite. You're near the source of life-giving, healing, supporting, protection, everything, and makes you almost want to go pray, right? Imagine if we could be in that space 3 times a day. Right? The Kuzari talks, if you guys are learning the Kuzari in another class, he speaks about how the Chassid, the ideal Jew, who's on a high level, he doesn't, what's the expression? To work so that you can eat, or you don't eat so that you can work, but you work that you can eat. So the Chassid, his life doesn't revolve around his meals, but it revolves around his prayer services. He lives in order to pray. He's just waiting for that prayer service to have this type of an encounter, this type of an experience. It's, of course, enjoyable. It's powerful. Let's move on. The next section, Ata Kadosh. Turn the page. Page 178. V'shimcha Kadosh. Kadoshim b'chol yom yalucha sela. Here, this is already explicitly the Zohar. The Zohar, I have the quote, but I'm not going to read it to you. But basically what he says, if you notice, there's 3 times it says the word kadosh. Ata kadosh, shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yalucha sela, and then a 4th time in the bracha at the end, Baruch Ata Hashem, Hakel HaKadosh. And that represents that what you're saying is that with each statement of the word kadosh, kadosh means holy, kadosh means sublime, means something very separate, very special. Each time you're referring to him in one of the four worlds, and you're basically bringing the closeness to God, bringing that godliness down through each of this. It's like a transformer. The bracha of Takadosh is like, what's a transformer? You take the electricity that's on, what is it, 220, and make it into 110, right? Because of the difference in America and Europe.
Stabilizer.
A transformer, it's called. It's transformer. It transforms it, and so the Takadosh is like the transformer of the holiness of God from the deepest, highest place next to the throne of God into all the way down through all the different levels into where I am, to my life right now. Baruch atah Hashem Hakel HaKadosh. God's holiness is present right here with me, or I'm with Him, however way you want it. So far, so good. The next section is beautiful, and maybe here we will mention the fifth level, maybe the highest level, and we've spoken about it before. The requests, the petitions. So you can, of course, beg of God from the lowest level as a dependent, saying, I need help. I need help with my sickness. I need help with my parnasa, my livelihood. I need help to be wise, to understand all these difficult classes and learn Hebrew and all the stuff that. So there's so many things that we need from Him, and we can beg for them from that standpoint, from that perspective. What is a request from this perspective? What is a request from being there together with God? So the best way to think of it, I think, sometimes you ask something from the king or from your superior, not from a distance, not from a place of a lowly underling, but from being very close to the king. Like if you are the minister of the king, or if you're acting on his behalf, if you're his ambassador, and you go to the leader and you say, listen, I need X, Y, and Z in order to accomplish our goals in this area. Like somebody who's in charge of a province for the sake of the government, right? So says, I need this amount of soldiers, and I need this amount of resources, and I need to, get the fiber optic cable because that'll give everybody a good education. So, but you're not asking for yourself. You're not asking it from a place of, I'm begging it because I need it. I'm your representative. I'm asking for these things from a place of we're on the same team. I want to have wisdom so that I can do your bidding in the world. I want to have, I want to be healthy so that I can be the best Jew that I can be. I want to have Jerusalem rebuilt. No, the ones that are national. I want to have Mashiach, not for myself. I'm not only asking because I'm an underling that's begging to receive. I'm asking from a place of closeness with God. It's sometimes requests can also be an expression of closeness. A request doesn't have to come from distance. It actually comes from a position of being appointed as someone who is acting on your behalf as an agent. And so this is a whole new perspective on what it means to pray from that level where you are close to God, you're united with God. And all these requests come from that place, not from this place of being a dependent, or even this place of feeling very connected or feeling dedicated. It's like praying from the inside, is what I'm trying to describe to you. Yes, Ben?
So what if it's like, the reason why we're doing all these requests is because these are the only things preventing you from like becoming like fully united.
Fully united. Correct.
Like,
Yes. Yes.
Like you'd be more united if you had the knowledge. And like the last thing is you want to be in the sense of Menacha, like.
Beautiful. Exactly. Well, you're skipping the modim, but you're right. Ultimately, to be experiencing the light of His face, it gives us blessing and it gives us goodness. We went through and we talked about the bracha of Sim Shalom in the other class, I think. But there's a list of good things that come as a result of experiencing the light of His face, as the metaphor of light being, of course, closeness to and for God's holiness. Of course, the one we skipped, there's two we skipped. One is praying for the temple service to be restored in the Ritzei, and ultimately, perhaps you're praying for the devotion and this feeling of closeness which you are experiencing now to be the inheritance of many other people in the world. And the place where this is described is in the Holy Temple. And you want this inspiration, this devotion, this clinging to God to be restored to the entire Jewish people. And then, of course, thanks. Thanks. It's a feeling of appreciation of all those good vibes that we've been describing at the beginning. Primarily, we're describing the good vibes of being close to God, what it feels like. And, you give thanks, hopefully you give thanks to the people that are closer to you. Sometimes people forget that. And they say thank you at the store, and they say thank you in the bank, and they say thank you. But when it comes to your wife or your husband, then, it's just natural. You take it for granted and you don't even say thank you. But of course, we don't want to make that mistake. And so from the closest place possible, and if you do remember, and if you do appreciate from a different place, from a place of closeness, that's the highest level of gratitude and the feeling of thanks, which come from intimacy. That's the highest level of gratitude possible. And then, of course, as Ben pushed us ahead to finish it off with Sim Shalom, perhaps the highlight of feeling that union, that connectedness to God, and feeling, as the metaphor says, the light of His face. Okay, comments, questions? I don't know if anybody's ever had a prayer service the way I've just described it. I don't know if you've ever tried to pray to God, not from the outside coming in, but actually we've come from the outside in all the previous stages of the prayer. But at the Amidah, you're supposed to be already there. So if you're already there, you're praying, as I said, from the inside, from a feeling of closeness to God. That can be an entirely different experience. It's so enjoyable. It's so strengthening. You feel shielded. You feel, if you're in the request section, you feel empowered. You're not asking as a dependent, but you're empowered. I'm going to act on your behalf. It's a totally different experience. Please, Jacob, and then I'll take your question.
Apologies, this is like a big tangent opening question. But what about for like Mincha, where we just go, if I'm not mistaken, we just say Ashrei and then just go straight to the Amida? It's very different than like what you're describing here, where it's kind of just like, boom, you're going like straight there. So how do you take what you've just said to us and apply that to Mincha?
It's good. It's a very good question. Very good question. So in spiritual practices, there's something that there's this... and also in psychology, there's experiences where you go through to train yourself to react to certain sounds or to certain experiences. It's to recall an experience you've already had. And sometimes if you train yourself that X is associated with Y, all you need to do is to maybe snap your fingers. And that, if you've been trained, that snapping your fingers automatically pulls you into all that world of associations, and you don't have to build it up each time. You're automatically plugged into that mode that you're very familiar with. So I think that's the idea of what we're striving for, is that at Mincha you're perhaps able to tap into be pulled right into that highest level of closeness to God if you've trained yourself many times with Shacharit, and that morning you've retrained, and so you start to recite the same words. It's the same Amidah. It's the same Amidah that came as the part of the pinnacle of a progression in Shacharit. Mincha, we don't have that build-up, but maybe the very fact that you're saying Ashrei, the very fact that you say the words, the Baruch Atah Hashem, and you take the 3 steps, those are all, sort of triggers that you can use them to draw yourself quickly into that higher state of closeness to God. But it's not easy. I totally understand that it's not easy, and but that perhaps it's possible, and I think that's the goal. The real goal, that's for another class. The real goal is to somehow, the word we use nowadays is to be mindful, to have mindfulness of a closeness to God, not only when you pray, but also in between the Shacharit and the Mincha, all day long. You're mindful of God, you're aware of God, you're feeling God's presence. And so that's much easier to jump into Mincha if you're on that level. But even if you're not, there's the ups and downs. There's going to be the different modes of consciousness. And then of course your question is much stronger. If you're not there, how do I get back there very quickly? Practice and these triggers, these uses of the posture, the words, of course, and how you're supposed to stand in the Amidah is the same for Shachrit and for Mincha. Reuven wanted to speak, and then I'll take David's question. Yeah.
You had said something about the 5th level. You were going to bring that up, and I missed that.
The 5th level is the agency. You're sort of acting on behalf of God. Got it. So you're on the inside so much so that you're actually an expression or an extension of God in this world. And that's why you're requesting for all the tools you need to be that extension. Yes, David.
Sometimes you're davening happily along, and then the tzipor starts praying, and you discover that the tzipor is an auctioneer in another life. And I've always skipped ahead to catch up with him. But from what you're saying, is it more important to daven in order than it is to, let's say the Amida with the group?
It's a good question. Practically, to daven together with the group is very complicated. Not everybody speaks Hebrew at the same pace, and
same time. I mean,
right? And the timing. So Chabad, for example, they teach everybody who studies with the Lubavitch movement. The Rebbe was a big believer in this stages. You don't skip. They don't skip, even if they're late, even if they're going to miss the timing that everybody else is davening. Daven later. You say your prayers one page after the next page, and whenever you finish, you finish. That overrides the idea of davening together with the tzibur. However, most other approaches, most other poskim say you should do what you can to daven, to start the Amidah together with the community, because that's a very important mitzvah to daven the community, with all due respect to the Arizal and the Kabbalah and these different stages. You can't skip all of the stages. I think we went through, in quite detail in a different class, what parts you can skip out of the Psukei de Zimra, which parts are essential and primary that can never be skipped. So you can shorten each of the other sections so that you can have your prayer together with the community. You have to learn exactly how to do it. But most poskim say you should be skipping in order to be davening the the highlight, that the core of Tefilah, which is the Amidah, the Shmona Esrei, to be having that at the same time as the community. And if you have to skip, sometimes you can skip. Of course, you have to learn how to do that. It's in another. I have a page I can give you if that's helpful. But we spent some time on it in another class. If anybody's interested, I could bring the page again. Somebody, show of hands, how many? Or you can share
I
it.
can show David.
David, you can show it and you can photocopy it. And it's not okay. Another question, last question. Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, so I heard an idea from Kubar Chassidut that like first stage represents like basically it's just like levels of like essentially in space and time. Each level is like more and more unity. Where like the first level is like what we exist in now, where everything's totally separate, and then the next is like in Yisira, it's like where the like lower Malachim live, where it's like emotional connection of like sort of space time with everything else, but like they're still existing below it. And then the next is like sort of above it intellectually, like there's intellectual unity, but like they're still not actually in it. And then the top level is like the angels there are the Seraphim that like combust themselves.
Cool. Very cool.
Because like they like
Yeah.
nothing can exist but God.
Right. There's so much more than what we gave you a bare bones explanation of the 4 stages, really because I wanted to explain what Tefilah is like from the highest level, which we're aiming for, of closeness to God. We'll stop here. Have a great day. Have a great week. If I don't see you, have a great week.
Shalom.